How's everyone doing today? Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, Manny Maradiege, coming to you guys today on April 11th with some more NFL topics and discussions to go over on today's episode, starting off with a discussion between J.J. McCarthy and the top three teams in the NFL draft. I'm going to pose a question just here in a few minutes, and I want to discuss it, break it down a little bit more, all around J.J. McCarthy and his rise up draft boards. Then, later in the show, we're going to talk about the 9 total players that were franchise tagged and how basically almost all of them have been signed to larger deals, extended deals. Why that is, who has been signed, who is left on that list. We're going to talk about all of it later on in the show. Then, towards the end, Caleb Williams, the projected number 1 overall pick, has responded to a former NFL player and his critics towards Caleb Williams on him not facing that much adversity and how that raises concerns for him and other teams as well projected to draft him, mainly the Bears. All of that is coming up on today's show. Please remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast. Before I jump into the first segment, I want to remind you guys, as I always do, if you're listening live to this episode, use the tip and donations link if you have any questions or comments that you want to make on any of the segments today. Using the link gsmcpodcast.net. Make sure that I can see your question pop up in my chat box. I can read it out loud on air. Then maybe carry the conversation elsewhere. Make it more engaging. It's a lot of fun that way, in my opinion. And it's also a big help for the network as well. So if you're able to do that with any of your questions, it's greatly appreciated. Again, the tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. Saying that, the first segment I want to get into is that discussion I mentioned around drafting J.J. McCarthy too early compared to maybe trading out of the top 3. This discussion mainly revolving around the Commanders and the New England Patriots because the co-host Michael Holley of Boston Sports Tonight spoke back on Monday about J.J. McCarthy and being a really good chance that he is drafted by the New England Patriots. Holley on the show said, "I'm hearing more and more chatter that J.J. McCarthy is high, if not first, on the boards of the Washington Commanders and the New England Patriots. He may be QB1 for both of these teams." On top of that, you have Tony Pauline and ESPN's Matt Miller also reporting similar things that they're hearing from their sources, pushing Drake May further down a little bit if you anticipate Jaden Daniels still being highly graded or graded above Drake May and J.J. McCarthy. If J.J. goes above those two, you would have to think J.J., or I should say Jaden goes after J.J. if McCarthy is projected to go so high. I don't think many people have Drake May being drafted over Jaden Daniels. To have May and J.J. go above Jaden Daniels, I think would raise a lot of questions. So that's where it stands right now. And it got me thinking because I've talked about JJ, I've talked about Drake May recently, just yesterday, and it made me think of this scenario, right? Is it riskier, if you have an opinion as well, leave it in the comments or in the chat box. Is it riskier to draft JJ McCarthy higher than people have him projected as a number 2 pick above Drake May? Is it riskier to draft him higher? Or is it riskier for the Patriots or the Commanders to just completely trade out of that number 3 or out of that top 3 in the draft and just live with what you got at quarterback, a bridge quarterback, and save it till next year to draft another high-caliber quarterback? Which scenario poses the greater risk? Which scenario poses the potential worst downfall if it doesn't pan out the way you think? Obviously, the good side about both of those scenarios or trading back is you accumulate more picks, but there's also a huge amount of risk to that, as well as drafting J.J. McCarthy super early. It could work out well. Really well, you look like a genius, right? If he turns out to be the best quarterback in this draft, or it turns out really, really bad if you draft the wrong guy, and then that sets you back even further. Look at the Steelers with Kenny Pickett, even the number one overall team selecting the Chicago Bears, how long they've been in a just constant cycle of finding their quarterback, then finding a coach, firing their GM, fixing everything in their organization. Though it sets you back a good amount by not drafting the right guy. So which scenario do you think is riskier? Well, looking at some of the points and some of the information I gathered, looking at J.J. McCarthy, just comparing him to Drake May and really where they stack up, if you're thinking about drafting J.J. McCarthy above Drake May and Jaden Daniels, over the last 2 years, J.J. McCarthy has put up a total of 5,680 yards compared to Drake May's nearly 8,000 yards. Completion percentage favors McCarthy nearly at a 69%. Drake May is at about a 65%. McCarthy over the last 2 years has thrown 44 touchdowns and 9 interceptions compared to Drake May's 62 touchdowns and 16 interceptions. And the record, very, very favorable towards J.J. McCarthy. 27 wins in the last 2 years, 1 loss over the last 2 years, 15-0 this past season. They won the national championship, very successful. Compared to Drake May, 17-9. And you look at that, that's very cut and dry if you're just going off of those stats. And then you have to realize, I talked about it yesterday when I was reacting to Merrill Hodges' comments on Drake May. You have to realize that May, in 2022, had a very impressive team, had a very impressive year that year. Clearly the better year in 2022. Then he had a lot of teammates depart, and he still was expected to perform, but with a lot less quality on his team. Was expected to carry that team, and you can say he wasn't ready. Just mechanics-wise is always a thing brought up with Drake May. Experience, age-wise, maturity, all that is brought up when you're talking about Drake May and why he potentially didn't succeed as much last year as he did the year before. Going back to yesterday, Merrill Hodge called him erratic. He's everywhere. He really doesn't look so sure in the pocket and quarterbacking a team as you would hope, in Merrill Hodge's opinion, compared to JJ. But then again, you look at JJ's team, he doesn't have to do as much probably as Drake May because his team was fully stacked. You have Jim Harbaugh coaching that team, his experience, developing quarterbacks, early success in the programs that he takes over, the teams that he takes over. That is a massive help for any young player, any young quarterback to have that voice in your ear, be coached by them, and just lead you to all the success that McCarthy had. Recency bias, again, is always a big thing with these players. You have one coming off the national championship and one that had an up and down season. A lot of people are just going to go with the player that had the most success in that program with Michigan, and I wanted to bring that up because I've been hearing a lot about this certain word that people use with JJ, the pedigree that he has, the championship culture that he comes from, the winning pedigree. It's always mentioned in some sort of description when anyone's talking about JJ, and I value that. I really do. I think it does make sense, and it does hold a lot of value with me when someone leads his team to success, even if they weren't responsible for winning games all the time, throwing the heck out of the ball and putting up 400, 300-yard games, 4 touchdowns. Still, winning is ultimately what gets you fired and hired in the NFL. And if someone is coming off of that, I think it holds more value with me. And back to the overall just discussion, where I fall in it, is it riskier to draft JJ higher than he is projected, or trading out of the top 3 to gain more draft capital and try and build a team around, because the teams in the top 3, I've said it before, aren't ready, really, in my opinion, to have a quarterback come in and be successful. I don't see it that way. Where I fall in the discussion, I would probably say it's riskier. There's a lot more risk in drafting JJ high because there's a lot worse that could happen with that scenario than trading out of the top 3, in my opinion. Trading out of the top 3, yeah, you could be bad again, but there isn't a doubt that you're going to get more players to fill out your roster, and you're just going to have more quantity, and definitely you're going to have more quantity, and some quality as well, because you're going to accumulate probably multiple second or first round picks. You're not going to get the highly touted quarterback that you desperately want, but I think you still get some good with trading out of the top three compared to drafting JJ too high, and if he doesn't work out, you've given up a lot, and you really didn't get much back with JJ. So that's where I fall in line with this discussion, picking a side after putting out all those facts and all this information. I still think it's riskier to draft JJ that high after all this time, because he has risen so late in the combine, pro day, and stuff like that. If he had this sort of attention throughout the year, Michigan was winning, and everyone was projecting him to be top 2, maybe top 3, then I would push back a little bit or hold off a little. But because he was projected below May, Daniels, and Caleb all year, and then now people want to push him up there, I still have my doubts about that. So I think that carries a bigger risk with drafting JJ higher. In both situations, you get good and bad, but I think there's definitely more bad coming with drafting JJ too early. Again, I don't have to say how valuable the quarterback position is. Having a good one makes you look 10 times better, and having one that's not as good or taking too long to really develop in the player that you need in a team makes you look a lot worse than you really are. If the rest of the team is great, you look really bad when the quarterback's making mistakes. End of the game, at the start of the game, you fall behind a lot in games. It all just piles on if the quarterback's not playing well, which is why people hold so much stock in these top 3 picks, because it can really make or break a situation with any team. A lot of young head coaches with these teams, so that is also another incentive to get this right. A lot is riding on this, and that is why I'm ever so excited to finally get to the draft. We're exactly 2 weeks away. Hopefully, it's going to seem like an eternity, but I'm counting down the days till that finally comes. But again, let me know what you guys think of that topic. Where do you fall on which side I posed to you guys in that question? Leave it in the comments or put it in the chat box live on this episode as well. But we're going to be able to move on after that, and we're going to go to a quick break right now, but there's a lot more to come on today's episode. After the break, we're going to talk about the Green Bay Packers and Lambeau Field, how they want to add another locker room, a potential third locker room to Lambeau Field, and what good can come out of that. What's the potential pushback and hold off on that coming from the board there in Green Bay? I'm going to let you guys know all the details soon after this break. Don't go anywhere. You're not going to want to miss that story.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on their face shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, rolling right along into the next segment. The Green Bay Packers and Lambeau Field, a historical site, a very big attraction for the city of Green Bay, Wisconsin, bringing in a lot of people, not just in Wisconsin, but around the state of Wisconsin. People come to see the games. It's a very big venue, a very big attraction for the entire state to have not only a massive team in the NFL with all of its history, but now them starting to trend in a positive direction. Bringing in all those people is great. But on top of just football and this team that holds their home games here, obviously, the Packers want to expand it a little bit more, want to broaden their horizons, and bring in college football games, soccer games, other events outside of sports to be hosted here. Because it's such a rich tradition here, they think they could grow it even more by bringing in extra curricular events here to the stadium. I'm all for it. I agree with them. But because the stadium, the Packers, aren't owned by one group, one person, they have to ask almost like for permission, for money, funds to get this sort of project going. They want to build a third locker room at Lambeau Field in order to attract, like I mentioned, college football games, pro soccer games, and other events like that. You might be asking, why can't they just use one of their two locker rooms? What's wrong with that? Well, the Packers don't actually allow the use of their home locker room to non-Packer related teams, players that come in only for one game, one event, because they have it open for all of their players year-round usually, so they don't want to move things around or, I guess, accommodate other people. It sounds bad, honestly, reading it out loud, but that's what they do. That's one of their rules. That's one of their procedures. They don't allow people in their home locker room, so they want to build a third one. And it's not out of the ordinary by any means. A bunch of other teams already have not just 3 locker rooms, but they have a lot more. Obviously, the newer ones have a lot more. SoFi has, I think, about 5 or 7 locker rooms. MetLife has 4 locker rooms. Hard Rock Stadium down in Miami, they have 3. Atlanta has 4 at their stadium. The Chicago Bears, I read today, are also trying to renovate their stadium. I'm sure they're going to have multiple locker rooms, or more than 2, at their stadium to host more events. The Cleveland Browns is another one. They're in the mix of trying to figure out a new stadium, a new location close to their stadium. All these new stadiums are bringing in a lot more people to come check out everything they have in their new buildings that they have. And it definitely attracts more because you see Atlanta always hosting one of the college football playoff games. SoFi is always in the conversation for something going on there. MetLife is hosting the final of the World Cup in a few years. It definitely makes an impact. It definitely makes a difference to have this. And the Packers see it this way, but they still have to ask for permission, like I mentioned. And the Packers have asked the Green Bay Brown County Pro Football Stadium District for about $3 million from its Capital Improvement Fund to help pay for the $5 million project that they're planning on building with this new locker room. The money in that fund, it's important to point out that it can be used for only projects at the stadium. So they have this fund for these sort of projects, usually for any renovations or stuff they want to do to their stadium. And the fund, again, it's important to point out that the fund isn't tax money. They don't collect it from people in that area. It's built up through user fees from game tickets, and it's saved from projects or for projects like this. The board's executive director said that there was about $6.5 million currently in that fund, and just to keep it safe as a precaution, they never ever let it drop below $2 million in that fund. So there is room if they want to provide that to the Green Bay Packers for this project that they want to do, but there is some doubts right now. They had a vote on it actually to have the Packers provide the information, the project that they want to have built, and the board voted 6-1 to hold off on the project, on the matter, until their next meeting in June, to hope to gather more information on the topic, how many other NFL stadiums have this, what the benefits are, how much can it really benefit them long term. And that's where the doubts sort of fall in for the board that I've read up on and kind of gathered here. Some of the biggest doubts that the board has to provide these funds to the Packers is that Green Bay should be having about one event other than just football games there per year. But right now they're averaging about one every 4 years. So that stat as it is, they're trying to project how much adding just one more locker room will change that. They're kind of on the fence of really believing if that one locker room will change it that drastically, because it is at a very low rate right now when I wrote it down. So that is pretty surprising, and it is a valid doubt to have, because already it's not looking good. How much will another locker room really change? Also, it seems like a lot of money for a locker room that'll be used only a handful of times over the next decade, which again is another, it kind of relates back to that first part. For using $3 million from that fund and the Packers providing that other $2 million, it is a good amount of money for that locker room. Obviously, they want to make it pristine and nice and have everything that other people, other teams might need. But it does, when you're using this sort of money, you definitely want to see what kind of compensation you're getting back for using all of this money on this project. You want to get a lot back. And right now the board is indecisive on how much really the Packers can provide back for them over the next few years, decade, if they provide this for the fund, because they'd be essentially cutting the fund in half. I mentioned they were at 6.5. If they use 3, obviously it brings them down very close to that limit that they have, so they want to avoid any potential of getting below that. That's a big concern for them. And this money is going towards something else to benefit other parts. It could go to other things around the stadium that could potentially benefit more to the Packers around the stadium. That was another point that was brought up by one of the board members. Does it have to be a locker room? Could it go somewhere else? Probably renovating a different part of the stadium, or trying to build another thing that's not a locker room. That's another suggestion that one of the board members has. So those 3 sort of topics right now are the biggest doubts for the board, and it does raise questions, and of course it is something to consider, because it is important from this point that it is a lot of money. The board doesn't really want to waste too much of it if it doesn't give them anything back. And the Green Bay Public Affairs Director, Aaron Popke, said that because they only have 2 locker rooms right now, and they do hold certain events, limited, not that many compared to SoFi or any of the other stadiums I mentioned, because they only have those 2, they're forced to convert their locker room that they have in the facility into a temporary locker room, and change everything around and have a lot of manpower change that into looking like a locker room, temporary, then putting everything back. And it's a big process. It's not simply just moving a few things and making it look like a locker room. I'm sure they have to bring in all sorts of equipment to move huge machines around in a professional football gym. It is a lot of work to be doing this constantly, and the Packers don't really want to keep doing that, in all honesty, and trying to build this new locker room, trying to get it to work. The Public Affairs Director, Aaron Popke, said that the gym also won't be available going forward. So without a third permanent locker room, the team might have to build a temporary one outside of the stadium, which, if you're talking about saving money, investing this money into the most reliable thing that could get you something back, building a temporary locker room is definitely not that. It's a big waste of money, because now they can't use the gym going forward. And if you build a temporary one, it's not going to stick around, obviously, for that long. You use all that money for it to just last you maybe a year or 2. It's not sensible to do that either. So they're right now at a crossroads to try and determine where this whole situation can go from here. They don't want to waste that money, and they don't want to continue to push the board if they're not going anywhere. Because the funny thing is about all of this, the Packers, or Popke, their public affairs director, told Fox 2 that the project can actually be done. It can be completed without the funds from the stadium, but they're in the mindset, they're feeling like, why have that fund if you're not going to provide it for a project like this? They feel like adding a third locker room, a renovation to their stadium, in addition to their stadium, on a topic that they feel very strongly about is perfectly in line with what this fund is there to do. And by the board not providing it, they're just left confused as to why they can't get this money from them to help them out a little bit. But again, they can do this project without that fund, but they'd just be left a little bit bitter about it. In all honesty, saying that, if you look back, just to wrap it up a little bit and talk about what events were held there, what sort of attractions the Packers bring in with this temporary setup at Lambeau with 2 locker rooms. They usually convert the gym, like I mentioned, and the last event that they held there was the Wisconsin-LSU game in 2016 for something else outside of professional football. The other event that they held outside of football in general is in 2022 when Bayern Munich played Man City there. A soccer game, an exhibition game was played there. So you kind of get something coming in a little bit from other sports, other sort of football, other types of football like college football. But again, you don't see it as often as all the other stadiums, and that's what Green Bay really wants to get to. Their next scheduled event is college football, but that's not set until 2026, September 5th, when Wisconsin will be playing Notre Dame there. And again, Popke really stresses that this new addition would allow them the chance to host games even before then. That's a lot of time, 2 years, 2.5 years from this point until 2026. There's a lot of opportunity there to host other things, bring in other teams, see that, Lambeau Field is actually a really cool place to come and play, and expose a different game, college football atmosphere to a new group of fans. I hope it gets done. I think it makes sense. I didn't know that they didn't have a third locker room already because of how historic that place is. The only downside is, from my personal standpoint, is the weather. The cold, I don't know how many people that attracts compared to Los Angeles inside of SoFi Stadium. Atlanta is warm. Again, another domed stadium. That's really the only negative for me, why Green Bay might not be the most ideal place. But you're talking about Lambeau. You're talking about all that history. People are going to want to go there. You want to attract as many people as possible that aren't wimps about it like me, worrying about the cold. But that's how it's going to work out right now. That's how it looks at this moment between the Packers and the board, trying to get this done, trying to attract more people to Lambeau and see and learn about their history at Lambeau. I think it's a good idea. We'll see how it all turns out. More to come from that, I'm sure. But we're going to leave it there and mosey on with the show. More stories to come after the break. I'm going to talk about the 9 franchise players that I mentioned getting their extensions early, who got it, and who's still left on that list. What we're going to do with those players, I'll reveal that after the break. And we're going to get to that story on Caleb Williams responding to the former NFL player, current analyst, giving him critics about no adversity in his career and how that could affect his professional career and the level of success he can have in the NFL. More details on that shortly. All of that is coming up after this break. I'll be right back.
Your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube. Absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Getting back to the show And the rest of the topics that I have on here, we're going to get to them in just a few seconds. But before I start on the third segment, I want to remind you guys, if you haven't already, if you have any questions or comments you want to make during today's live show, use the tip and donations link that you see on your screen right now and running across the ticker down below, gsmcpodcast.net. You can use that link with any of your questions. Using it makes it easier for me. I can see your question pop up in the chat box. We can engage and interact that way. I can read it on air and maybe take the conversation somewhere else, bring in different perspectives. I think it makes it better. It's also a massive help for this show and the network. We send a big thank you to you guys anytime anyone is able to use that link. Once again, the tip and donations link is gsmcpodcast.net. Saying that, we can move on. Franchise tag players, where they sit right now, probably in a very good spot compared to other years and at other points this offseason where it didn't look great. Nobody wants to get franchise tagged. I'm sure any player that you see get interviewed about the possibility of getting tagged, transition tagged, their face, their whole demeanor, I'm sure, goes down. They're not the happiest talking about it, and a good amount of them actually got the franchise tag this year. Josh Allen was tagged from the Jacksonville Jaguars, Brian Burns with the Panthers, L'Jarius Sneed, Michael Pittman, just to name a few. They were all tagged in order to keep them from hitting the market, potentially their teams getting outbidded and losing their player for basically nothing. You want to keep him around and hold some value, or just extend him because you value him that much, and you just want that extra bit of time to not have that risk of losing them with them hitting the free agent market in March when it started. But now, you look at those players that were tagged. Once they're tagged, they have until July the 15th as the last day for these tagged players, for these teams, to agree on any multi-year, long-term agreement, extension with any of these players. Anything past that, it becomes official, and these players are just on that one-year deal with that average salary that they get from the players in their position. And it's only like a rental if you look at it that way. So you don't want that. You don't want that to just loom over the season, affect the player in any way, affect the team in any way. It's always better to get the extension done. And what's funny about this year, like I mentioned, there was 9 tagged players, and already there's been 7 of them that have signed that long-term deal. And it's unusual because these sort of deals don't usually get agreed, discussed, get reported as being close to done until really June or later than that, close to the deadline in July. And now we still sit in mid-April right now, and most of them have already been signed to these deals. The only ones that are left are T. Higgins and Antoine Winfield on that list. And again, going through the players that were tagged and now have these long-term deals, I'm sure you guys have seen most of them get reported on already. Josh Allen, the latest one, got a 5-year, $150 million deal. Justin Madubuike was one of the first ones. He got a 4-year, $98 million deal. Kyle Duggar, 4 years, $58 million. Jalen Johnson, another one, 4 years, $76 million. Very important positions, like I mentioned there. Cornerback, safety, defensive line for Brian Burns, Josh Allen, Justin Madubuike. L'Jarius Sneed, a defensive back, the kind of year that he had, he got an extension with the Tennessee Titans. Michael Pittman as well, the Colts' top wide receiver, another one that got extended for 3 more years. Very important positions, and all these deals are great deals. None of these are bad, in all honesty, because Allen and Burns become one of the highest paid defensive line players. Sneed is up there now on salary per year as one of the top paid corners. Michael Pittman is up there as well. And I don't think anybody looks at these deals and thinks, oh, they got way too much money, or the team fleeced that player because they were franchise tagged, so they got bad deals. I think these are all pretty fair deals, and after looking at these and seeing who was left over, I saw a tweet by Andrew Brandt, a sports insider, that brought up a very good point that I never really thought of before looking at these deals. He said that these deals are great, just like I said now, but potentially not the best, absolute best deals that these players could have got because of that point that I made. They only negotiated with one team because they were franchise tagged. Imagine if all of these players, very good players coming off of great years, had the opportunity to talk with everybody in the league and talk with all 32 teams, and maybe a team out there could have offered more than $150 million for Josh Allen, more than $100 million for Justin Madubuike, more than $85 million or something like that for L'Jarius Sneed. That's just left out there somewhere in the ether to constantly go over, oh, what if. But it is a valid point because it does limit you to only one team. But then again, a lot of these players I don't think really wanted to leave. They just want to get paid what they believe is their value. And like I mentioned, I don't think any of them got fleeced or anything like that. I don't think any player should be left unhappy. Most of them are happy, especially the ones that got traded, like Brian Burns, L'Jarius Sneed, to go somewhere and get paid what they wanted, because the Panthers, I'm sure, probably couldn't afford that. The Chiefs probably couldn't afford that after they extended Chris Jones to a massive deal as well. So someone had to go. L'Jarius worked it out with the Chiefs at least. It ended on good terms. They figured if they couldn't get a long-term deal done, the Chiefs were nice enough to trade him and have him get paid somewhere else. But now that leaves, like I mentioned, T. Higgins and Antoine Winfield. Really only T. Higgins. Before this, yesterday, Adam Schefter reported that Antoine Winfield and the Bucs are close. There's optimism from both sides that a deal could finally be agreed in one of these next few days. If I haven't missed it, be reported on my phone. Okay, we're good. Nothing has been, there's no breaking news yet on this deal, but there is optimism that it will be close to be done. Maybe tomorrow. Usually all these big deals happen over the weekend, so there is good news that Antoine Winfield can get a new contract soon, and it is reported to also make him the highest earning safety on salary per year in the league. Currently, the highest paid safety on that criteria is Derwin James. He makes $19 million per deal or per year. So if Antoine Winfield's going to jump him, you probably expect him to get $21 million per year. I actually don't know how much Justin Simmons gets. He's another one that was highly paid, and the Broncos just couldn't restructure his deal, and now he's a free agent. That would have been another one that would have been a good note to throw out there. I could just find it right now, but right now that's how it stands. The Bucs and Antoine Winfield are in a good spot right now, and it is big because the Buccaneers already had conversations with Mike Evans. They were able to bring him back. Baker Mayfield they were able to bring back, and they keep this core group of players that they had success with last year. Minimal success, I'm sure it surprised a lot of people, but now bringing them all back, proving that it's not a one-year wonder. It didn't happen by a freak accident. Being able to build on that success, building on all their low points in the season as well. It's huge for this team because they found something in Baker. They were able to ignite, find that player that was drafted number 1 overall, and it looks like he's fitting in there the best out of any team that he's gone through. And now they're going to be able to keep Antoine Winfield, who had a great year last year, captains that defense. They lost Devin White, which is pretty big because of the talent that he is, but they're bringing back a leader like Lavonte David, Antoine Winfield back there quarterbacking the defense. It's huge for them, and I think it will eventually get done, so that's great. But that only leaves T. Higgins, and the difference with T. Higgins and the Bengals and how his situation is going to play out, the difference with him is that he's the one that asked for a trade. He's the only one on here. I'm pretty sure Brian Burns might have asked for a trade or was the other one that was most unsettled, but he was also another one that asked for a trade or was disgruntled with his team. But T. Higgins flat out came out at some point this year and asked for a trade because the Bengals and his representatives weren't really engaging at all in any contract talks, and he wanted to get that going at least by requesting a trade. Maybe you get the ball rolling, but nothing has been reported or nothing has really made any movement, progression on this end with T. Higgins and the Bengals. And before I move any further, Justin Simmons actually makes $15.2 million per year. So he is up there, but not as much as Derwin James. But anyway, back on T. Higgins. He requested a trade, and that makes people think that there is some bad, negative feelings there. But I'm sure the Bengals feel that if they keep him one more year, he's not going to be pouty or not try his best is what I'm trying to say. He will still go out there and produce, but he won't be clearly as happy as long as he gets a bigger deal. He can be a number one option for a numerous amount of teams. That's clear from what we've seen from him and Joe Burrow, the kind of connection that they have. Of course, the Bengals don't want to lose him, but they have to kind of balance their checkbook right now. Where do they want to invest some of this money, salary cap that they have? Jamar Chase is just down the line a year or two where you get really close to not losing Jamar Chase, but you get to that point where he is on that last year of his deal, and you're definitely not going to – if there's a player you don't want to lose on the Bengals, it's obviously Jamar Chase. Joe Burrow as well, 1A, 1B, but if you had to make a choice, unfortunately, the odd man out there is T. Higgins if it doesn't fall in line with whatever they're doing. Luckily, they signed Joe Burrow already to that extension. Jamar's gonna get one. There's no way he doesn't. So T. Higgins right now, I'll be surprised, really, if they get something done. I feel like if they really wanted to, there would be something out there already that they're getting close or nothing's really happened. It's just crickets right now. So I think I want to say he goes somewhere else, but then again, they're going to ask for a lot when they could just keep him. And I don't know which teams right now would have that high of asking price or would be reliant to give up that much to get T. Higgins and give him a big contract if they're ready right now. I can't think that off of the top of my head, but I think it's probably most likely going to play out. He plays this last year, then they try and re-sign him in free agency. The risk with that is that they could lose him for free. They don't want to lose that, or they don't want to do that. So they're kind of playing with fire here a little bit, but that is where they stand right now with him. They have to think about this long term, who they really value more than the other. And it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out because T. Higgins, like I mentioned, great talent, can be a number one somewhere. You just got to have to figure out the money, the financial thing about it. It always takes long. The draft is always a place where something can happen. The Bengals hold the 18th pick, if I'm not mistaken. So that, again, it's another intriguing bit. If they trade T. Higgins to somebody else, they accumulate a draft pick late in the first round this year. Maybe they move up, package T. Higgins and that 18th overall pick, and move up in the draft and get a player that they really want. Maybe one of the top receivers in this year's draft. You never know what could happen in this draft. I wouldn't put it past them to do something like that, or maybe for another first-round pick next year. They have a lot of options, so they really have to weigh what they want to do, what's good for this team long-term, because they have a lot of what you need to have success in this league. They got the quarterback, the wide receiver. The offensive line is definitely better. An underrated defense. You just have to iron out all these other things. But that's where that stands. Almost everybody that signed the franchise tag is extended. Those last few dominoes just have to fall. So we're going to monitor that as that goes on. But we're going to go to the last break of today's show. And on the other side, we're talking number one overall pick, Caleb Williams, what he had to say to Greg McElroy when he said Caleb Williams has faced not too much adversity in college or up to this point, how that could affect his career in the NFL, what that compares to with other quarterbacks that the Bears should think about. More on that story after this. You're listening or watching to the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Back here on the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast to talk more about the number 1 overall pick, Caleb Williams. Everything's been said about Caleb Williams except Roger Goodell announcing his name on that podium come April 25th when he is expected to be drafted to the Bears. And it's a foregone conclusion at this point. We've talked about that, their meetings, their pro days, the combine, everything. But now, more people, in all honesty, have to find something to talk about with Caleb Williams. And it seems like that with this story, this comment that was made from Greg McElroy, a former NFL quarterback and ESPN analyst, questioned how much adversity Caleb Williams has faced up to this point in his college career that will correlate, somehow lead to success in the NFL. On the Kevin Clark podcast, he had Greg McElroy on, and his quote was that Caleb Williams has never experienced adversity. I do wonder, is there a sense of entitlement? Is there the chip on the shoulder that's going to keep him going 10 to 12 years down the road the way it does Mahomes? Caleb Williams saw this, a lot of people saw this, and Caleb Williams took it to his Twitter account where he responded with a very well thought out post, I should say. Very organized if you haven't seen it. He said, let's go back to school again, laughing emoji, shaking my head emoji, because I'm bored right now. Adversity, then he goes on to define it, a state or instance of serious or continued difficulty or misfortune. Then he lays out year 1, year 2, year 3 of college. Year 1, didn't start freshman year. Year 2, popped hammy, championship game. First quarter, lost because of my hammy. Then year 3, 7-5 record my last year of college ball. Touching more on that year 2, he suffered that injury in the championship game, the Pac-12 championship game against Utah. He hurt his hamstring, and then if you saw that game or saw anything about it, the box score, highlights, whatever, you saw that it really hindered his play because everything that's been said about Caleb Williams up to this point, out of the pocket, extending plays, magical plays that just keep drives alive. If your hamstring is dragging you back, holding you back, it takes away a lot of your game. A good percentage of how you play is now gone. So in that, they lost the game. He couldn't be himself, and that hindered their performance, his performance in that game. Then last year, they weren't particularly great, 7-5 like I mentioned, and there were some highs, a lot of high-scoring games. He made a lot of plays, but their defense wasn't really there. Just record-wise, it was all right. So there is stuff to deal with that. You have to deal with how you monitor the locker room, the morale, keeping everybody's head in it. That's some adversity. To me, it is. Year 2, I don't really have to explain it. Getting all the way to the championship, then having an injury hold you back. More adversity you have to deal with. Not starting the freshman year. A lot of quarterbacks don't really start their freshman year, don't have a great freshman year, but it is adversity. I'll give him that one as well. And it is just interesting because with this comment from Greg McElroy, not focusing on adversity and having it almost correlate or just lead to success in the NFL is where he loses me a little bit. He didn't really flat out come out and say that if you have no adversity, you're not going to have success, but he painted it that way when he said it, the quotes. He mentioned entitlement in there, not having the chip on your shoulder that'll keep you going 10 to 12 years, like Patrick Mahomes. And he makes it sound like you need some of that to be a great Hall of Fame quarterback. It could help. It does certainly mold you and teach you life lessons. I'm not going to deny that. It teaches you how to get over certain hurdles, some things that don't go your way, overcoming that. I fully understand that, but I don't think it's a criteria or a prerequisite of having success in the NFL. All of these players are obviously different. Each of them are going to forge their own path. Some things are out of their control on how their careers end up. Team decisions, players being traded, salary cap, things like that. That also has a big play on how certain players, their careers play out. If their best wide receiver is traded away, they make cuts to another team, they can't figure out a contract with their quarterback. Look at Dak Prescott. He now could be moving on from the Cowboys if they don't figure out something there. There's a lot of external factors that could affect someone's career as well. This is a decent part of it, but I don't think it's that big a part for him to come out and say something like that. It all just seems to fall in line with, if you've seen it in the media, just critics coming out and saying things about Caleb when it just seems like there's really not much to talk about when Caleb is certainly going to go to the Bears. People almost are reaching for something to talk about with Williams, trying to bring something up. I'll give an example. Merrill Hodge said in February that he said that Caleb Williams isn't special. Taylor Lewan also said he didn't get a good vibe from Caleb Williams at the NFL Combine. He explained it, but then again, saying that you don't get a good vibe from him, what does that have to do? What does that mean, really, when you're talking about a quarterback? He certainly, to my knowledge, hasn't met him, hasn't really talked to him as much as like all these teams have. So what does that have to do with really anything that Caleb can be as a player, as a person? If you've never met him or just going off of what he said at the Combine, that's another thing that happened. And also when he was at the USC game, I want to say, it was the women's USC game, I'm pretty sure, and they were making fun of it. There was all those memes coming out about Caleb Williams having a pink cover on his phone, questioning if his nails were painted or not, and things like that. People were just poking fun at it. I took it pretty lightheartedly. I didn't think it was too serious, but again, some people did. If you look up just on social media how some people reacted to it, some people took it a bit more serious and pushed back on people just leaving Caleb Williams alone, stop questioning him on what he does, on stuff that holds no real value, like whatever phone case he has, color phone case, what he does with his nails or something like that. I didn't think it was too serious, but some people responded to it, and bringing things up like that, I do see why. Those things don't matter. As long as he's playing great, what does it really matter what he's doing? Unless he's doing bad things, illegal stuff outside of football, whatever he does, whatever he feels like doing, I'm sure any team would be fine with. And the biggest point with all of this, with people on the outside trying to criticize Caleb, trying to pick at things, to find things to talk about, the only opinion and the only evaluation of Caleb on whatever he does that matters is from the Chicago Bears. They've had numerous meetings with him. They've taken him to multiple dinners and seen him on his pro day. They finally got his medicals, brought him in for an official visit. All that stuff matters to just the Bears, what they think of him. And from all the reports and all the news that have been coming out, nothing but positive has come from Chicago. It seems like they really love the kid. They brought in players on their current roster right now to meet him, interact with him. Nothing has been said negatively about him. So in all just general view of this, the only thing that really matters is what the Bears think of him, and he's been acing everything that they've been putting him through. And also with all of this, it's not most players that are big players, huge players that are coming out of college, most of them face their biggest adversities, if you think about it, as pro players. If you faced all of this, just things you have to get over in college, in your life before that, you don't really see a lot of people coming in with all of that experience. I'm sure it helps them grow as people if they have, but it's not really common in every player that comes in through college to have all these life-changing pivot moments in their life. You're making one of the biggest jumps in your professional career as a person, becoming a professional football player, going into the NFL, then learning how to become an adult, how to be a leader when you're so young. That's when all the adversity comes in. That's when you have to learn some of your biggest lessons. You're going to have some massive failures, big learning curves, adjusting to not maybe liking some of the people you work with. That all comes with maturing and becoming a professional. To say that he hasn't faced enough adversity before and questioning that, I think is a bit of a reach when he's making such a huge jump like this. Now is when we're going to see the adversities, the problems, maybe dealing with injuries, stuff like that. Becoming a professional, that's where we're going to see things, and then that's where we can evaluate him on getting over those adversities, growing from it, learning from it. I think it's way too premature to jump on him now and say, oh, you don't have a big chip on your shoulder because you haven't had a massive life-changing moment to happen to you, adversity to happen, when he has had some of those things happen to him. So it didn't really make too much sense for me. His ways, I'll certainly say, are a little bit unorthodox. It doesn't flow with the current trend, history we've seen with some players. So, okay, it's a little bit different. People don't really like change, so it could rub people the wrong way. But again, with NIL and with this whole new generation coming up, growing up through paying people in NIL, through NIL, and in college, all these athletes, I think, on a bigger topic, are just going to be more outspoken, unorthodox, do things their way. And why shouldn't they if they're getting paid for it? Colleges are benefiting off of their name, image, and likeness. Why wouldn't they be more outspoken and try to take reign of their career? Caleb's really the first person to surprise a lot of people with the way he does things. But if people are upset now, it's going to get a lot worse, and people are not going to like it a lot more later on. You already see it with Dion, Shador, Travis Hunter, him saying they're not going to go to certain teams, certain cities, it's not going to flow. That's just going to grow and grow more because of all this money being flowed into these players, the transfer portal and all that. That's a whole nother topic, but this is the new kind of players that come into the league and this sort of change that has been brought in with NIL and things like that. So I'm not saying people should be happy about it, but just that this is where it's going. Caleb's the first one to do it with so much notoriety and so much fame, really, in college. He does things differently. People are taken back by it. They try to criticize these players more and more, but it's just a trend. It is going to grow more and more in college and these players coming through. So you don't have to like it, but it is coming in my estimation. So try and find some peace in mind with these changes that these players are coming into the NFL with. But that's where it stands with Caleb Williams. I didn't think those comments were warranted, but again, he'll just have to prove it out on the field, and that's how you quiet all these critics. So that's where that stands on those comments from Greg McElroy on Caleb Williams, his response, what I think of it. Let me know what you guys think also with his situation and those comments. Were they out of line? I would love to know what you guys think. But I have run out of time on today's episode. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to today's episode of the GSMC Chip Shot Football Podcast, presented by the GSMC Sports Network. Remember to like, follow, and subscribe to the show as well as the network in itself. Also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok for more of this network's content outside of sports as well. If you want to see more of me and this show's content, check out the GSMC Sports Network channel and the Podcast Network channel on YouTube for YouTube Shorts that are posted on there, full recorded live shows that are all on there as well, on top of individually recorded segment videos from the live shows. If you want to go back and watch a specific segment, or if you missed one and want to catch up on it, all of that stuff is on both channels as well. Tune in every weekday at 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time for more NFL and football conversations with me, your host, Manny Maradiaga. Thanking you guys again for joining me, and I'll see you guys tomorrow to close out the week.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great.